Hey everyone, welcome to the CyberHub Engage podcast, our CISO Saturday special. I got a great guest for the show today, an old friend of the show's who was with us at RSA with his medals of honor and distinguish and valor. And now he's finally dressed down, ready for a conversation outside the halls of the most glorious cybersecurity show on the planet in the most non-glorious city in the entire country of San Francisco. So I've got David Vaughn on the show. We are going to have a great conversation. David is the lead security research engineer at Mastercard. And we're going to be right back with David here after a small word from our sponsors.
All right, guys. So before we kind of get going on today's episode, I want to talk to you about privacy and security, obviously, right? But how many of you guys do what I do? Travel a lot, go work out of coffee shops. You need to get out of it. You need to kind of go brainstorm. You know, you go to your favorite Starbucks, or in my case, my favorite coffee shop here in Atlanta. You sit down, you put in your AirPods, you're listening to your favorite CyberHub Engage or Goodbye Privacy podcast or Journey if you want to listen to music, and you're having a good time. You're up and away working, going over apps, documents, coding, whatever it is that you do for work, analyzing logs, whatever it is, reading a really important email from your boss, and then all of a sudden you see that person kind of staring at your screen and you go, dude, don't look at my screen. Can't I have some privacy? Well, up until right now, the answer to that would have been, I got to sit in the corner of the coffee shop or the side of the coffee shop to get that. Not anymore. With Get Smart Eye, you don't have to do that anymore. Get Smart Eye is a very cool app that you can use on your phone. It reads your biometrics, so it reads your face. This is how it works. It's looking at your face. So while you're reading a document, it's making sure you're the only person looking at it. Try to put another phone in front of it, take a picture of the document, screen goes black. Someone gets behind you, tries to look at your screen, like that nosy person at Starbucks or wherever, screen goes black. No one can see what you're seeing on your device when you're using Get Smart Eye. So support our friends, and my very good friend Dexter, who is not a security guy, who came up with this product on a trip overseas dealing with security guys and went, how come I can see everything you guys see? Isn't that like the complete opposite of security? And he's absolutely right. He's launched this amazing product. So go to getsmarteye.com/James, getsmarteye.com/James, getsmarteye.com/James for a link to download the app and the opportunity to see a free demo of it. This is great for a person, a small business, an enterprise business. If you travel a lot, this is the right app for you. So again, go to getsmarteye.com/James to get access to the app I don't leave home without.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn with Cyber 2.0.
Hi, I'm Jerome from Vaughn Technologies.
We are hosting a lunch and learn for healthcare service providers and professionals. Our partner, Data Media Associates, is located in Alpharetta, Georgia, and the event is October 16th at 10 a.m.
Now come prepared to hear about cybersecurity insurance, risk mitigations with what's happening with ransomware, and also to learn more about HIPAA compliance.
And don't forget, we'll also have someone there to talk about cybersecurity insurance. Don't forget to register for the Lunch and Learn. You can go to our website, which is www.Vaughntechnologies.com, which is spelled V as in Victor, ELON as in Nancy, technologies, which is plural.com. Look for that Lunch and Learn and click on it to register. See you soon.
David, welcome back to the show. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So you literally just got started at Mastercard.
I did. I'm in like week 3 here, so it's been a fun ride. A little overwhelming trying to learn the organization. The culture is pretty amazing here.
That's awesome. And so for those who may be listening for the first time, because I think when we did our impromptu podcast at RSA, And I mean, like, we literally had like no time to prepare at all. We just had a
Yeah, we
basic
said screw it, let's do it
conversation.
live.
Yeah, we're like, hey, let's just do this. Turn on the camera, hold the mic.
We were having so many broisms though, like you're representing Augusta and the Cyber Center of Excellence and all that, and it was like, oh, this is perfect.
I'm like, so many. It's really interesting. We're actually going to Augusta, and we're doing for National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which it literally starts in 3 days. We're going out to Augusta and doing a whole day of just how the ecosystem has changed in the last year.
I can't think of any place really that has embraced cyber as much as Augusta has. It's insane the amount of money, both private and public sector, that have been invested to support Army cyber moving to Augusta. Pretty incredible.
Yep, and they've embraced it like they've embraced the Masters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
full-fledged, man.
Hopefully that doesn't require you to buy a house in order to be a member of the cyber community down there, like you have to with the Masters.
I would buy a house. I would buy a house there just to be part of the Masters, because that's just unbelievable.
We try to go and get sympathy just to be like, hey, we've never seen this. We're in uniform. We're military. And they're like, yep, thanks. Have a good one. Thanks for your service.
Here you go. Here's a candy bar.
Yeah. Oh, that's $5, by the way.
Would you mind just telling our viewers briefly about your background? Because you do have a very distinguished background.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the industry for about 20 years, primarily U.S. public sector. About 3 years ago, I made the dive into fintech financials. Was at BB&T and just recently joined Mastercard. But the root of my experience really comes from my service. I'm a Army reservist. I'm a warrant officer. Actually, just made the promotion list, the CW4.
Congratulations!
About that, yeah. But in the Army, I am in a cyber units, and my focus is in ensuring that our forces are cyber mission ready for whether it be cybercom or Army cyber missions, and that gives me a great deal of hands-on with the skills of varying skill sets, right? Like, so everything from entered apprentice to master level, trying to figure out how we can get them to the next level. And really signing off on their ability to do missions unsupervised or, different titling authorities.
First of all, thank you for your service. I'm so glad to be speaking to another member of the U.S. Army and now the Air Force. Michael's in the Air Force. We make fun of him all the time.
Hey, you got to be careful, man. Air Force is pretty sharp. Once you get to the joint level, all the crap talking between branches lasts for about 2 weeks, and then you realize that they have value-added strengths in different areas that you might not. So
I've been working with Micah for nearly 3 years. He still gets crap from me on a daily basis for being in the Air Force.
They get treated so much better. They only deploy for 4 to 6 months.
I've deployed downrange for 7.
I had a guy that reported to me. I was the base FOBIS 6 OIC. So basically, I was the director of communications for the base at the time. And this Air Force airman, which is like a PFC for us, right? Comes in. He's in just civilian clothes. He's wearing a hat that has a Ranger tab that says infidel on it. And I knew right away that we were going to get along just great. And this kid was, teaching me things in PowerShell and Python and stuff like that. It was incredible that he was just so gifted in those skill sets. But as soon as I got used to having him, he comes in one day and he's like, "Hey, Chief, it's been nice. I'm out of here." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? You just got here." He's like, "Yeah, we only deployed for 5 months." And I'm like, I hate you. So yeah, that was my lesson with them. And, there's some brilliant folks in the Air Guard. You got Raf Mudge, wrote Cobalt Strike and Armitage. You got Kyle Hesloven. You got Tom Brennan, helped write the Modbus protocol. I mean, they're stacked. I had the privilege of working with a couple of cyber weapons officers, which is a relatively new thing for them. And quite amazing, the skills that they have. I think the one thing that they could probably do better is soft skills, right? Like having a little empathy for people that aren't as smart as them.
Or don't eat as good as they eat.
Yeah.
or as slow as they eat. I mean, I remember chow at the hall. It was like 5 minutes. That's all you get. Air Force, they sit down with their knives and forks and like classical music in the background, you know, enjoying their filet mignon, maybe a lobster tail on the side of it.
Yeah, no, they definitely they get treated much nicer. But you know, the old adage, right? The grass is greener on the other side, right? It's always seems greener, and I'm sure there's a handful of Air Force people that would disagree that life sucked while they were in the service. So.
I mean, do you remember like when I remember in MEPS, right? I did MEPS in Colorado, and when you go to MEPS, you're going with all four branches of the military.
Oh yeah,
There's no. And everyone looked at the Air Force guys and were like, so you guys get the easiest basics of all of us.
Yeah.
So you guys are going to like a 6-week summer vacation while we're going to like 6 weeks of hell in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Oh, and so you went to Oklahoma. I went to Fort Seal as well.
Yeah.
And,
horrible place.
Funny thing is at MEPS, I have the funniest MEPS story. The night before, my girlfriend had left a nice love mark on my neck, which I had to show up to basic training with. And the minute that I got off of the cattle car, I had a drill sergeant in my face asking me what the heck that was on my neck. And of course, I'm toning it down quite a bit, but instinctively, my smart aleck self said it was a curling iron burn, drill sergeant, and that was the last time that I ever made a smart comment in basic training. So. Back then they were still allowed to hit you, so that was corrected very quickly.
I was called the human water pump.
Oh, nice.
My first 2 days in basic training, because every time he would talk to me, my hands would one of my hands would move out of attention just instinctively as a reaction.
Yeah.
And he called me the human water pump for 2 days. Kind of stuck around for a little while after too.
I still can't stand the taste of water out of a plastic canteen. It literally makes me sick just to think about it. So.
But based on your background, there's a really big discussion in cybersecurity, and you and I can share military stories for hours, and Micah can just sit there and be like, "Oh, that's nice." We never had to do that. We were in air-conditioned buildings. Micah did deploy overseas. He was in Afghanistan for how long, Micah? 7 months?
7 months doing air base defense and convoy security.
He was air defense and convoy security for 7 months in Afghanistan.
Yeah, what about a bomb room by chance, which is like one of the nice places in Afghanistan.
Yeah, like the best base in Afghanistan.
I was moving between Bagram and Fobs.
Do you remember the South Park episode where they talk about Vietnam and the roller coasters that the guys had in Vietnam?
That's funny. Yeah.
But we're at a very pivotal time in kind of cybersecurity. I feel like we're ahead of we're about 15 months away from a presidential election. I think 14 months in a week from a presidential election, if I'm not mistaken, or 13 months in a week from a presidential election. You started cybersecurity kind of, doing it in the government sector. And how do you think we're doing? Because if you believe everything you read, we're in horrible shape. The Russians and the Chinese can beat us just by clicking enter on a keyboard. And, our life's going to be over. And I feel like that picture is just a horrible representation of really the well-qualified men and women that dedicate their lives for the protection of our nation. So could you give us, nothing obviously classified or anything like that. I don't want you to be specific at all, but just make us feel a little good today.
Well, so I actually just watched a briefing that General Nakasone did at AUSA, and it's one of the things. It's easy to be salty when you think that things aren't going the way they should be, right? Like we should be way smarter. We should be developing tools. I mean, everything that's happening that I mentioned in the Air Guard with those really smart folks, my opinion is it should be replicated everywhere, right? But finding those people that have that natural passion for being better than they were, continuously self-developing, being a member of the community, being stewards to the community, and being clearable, those are really big challenges. And, I was taken back when I heard him say, have we ever in a branch at the same time? In fact, the school was built before the cyber branch was created. And it all stems back to General Alexander when he was doing his roadshow about the the 2 and the 6 coming together. And for the non-military people, that's intel and signal coming together. And in the Army, it's always been an unspoken rivalry between the two branches. And what I've seen and where we're at right now from where we were when he first made that comment is night and day different. I just came back from an exercise probably about 4 months ago where I actually got to see the different compos, and compos is active duty, guard, and reserve. And the active duty soldiers were speaking about skill sets that were phenomenal. Like, they had PhDs. There were people there that actually had PhDs, were captains, majors, and speaking to the level of detail that you would expect in industry. I was very shocked to find out that one of these soldiers, female captain, out of Augusta, actually, she was active duty. I'm shocked. I thought she was a reservist, because typically the Guard and Reserve, we're hand selected, we're recruited based on civilian acquired skills. That was my case, and then they send you to a whole bunch of other training to try to make you smarter and better. It's an ongoing struggle for myself to make me smarter and better. Usually what I try to do is stay in a Holiday Inn Express the night before anything I do. And it generally makes me an expert in all things. But no, I mean, to get back to your question though, we have come a long way. And I think General Nakasoni's term was persistent engagement. And that really, when you see the things that we're involved in, you see the amount of effort that goes into an exercise or an operation, the amount of due care and due diligence that goes into the potential for collateral damage. It's quite amazing. And it kind of sucks, though, to go from seeing that capability to then go back to your civilian job where you're stifled by bureaucracy and rules and you're not allowed to do things back to the adversaries, even though you know who they are. It is also challenging at times to know like ground truth, and then several months later seeing the different media spins, whether you're on the left or the right. But which particular news agency you watch, their spin on something that and then you can't talk about it, right? So those are the challenges of being in a cleared environment, I guess.
It's real. I kind of want to bring up another point, and you spoke of, Director Nakasone. You called him General, but he is the director of the NSA today.
Absolutely.
I think, and he's unbelievable. I was at 2 briefings that he did here when he was still the general and leading Cyber Command, Army Cyber Command, before he was taken to the National Security Agency. And one of the things that he constantly spoke of is the need for a relationship from the DoD to the DHS level to the private sector. Mm-hmm. And in there, I'm forgetting state and local. And a lot of it had to do around that time. It was right when there was a bunch of questions of interference in the 2016 elections and so forth. And he brought up a very interesting point. And this morning, as you and I are speaking now, in the background, there's a hearing on the Hill on election security. Mm. And they have 3 experts up there who I've never heard of.
Isn't that always the case, though, right?
Right.
The experts come out of the woodworks, right?
Right. The experts that are coming out of the woodworks are trying to sell to state and local government election stuff. And I'm like, these are the wrong people to have up there. Why don't we have someone from Director Krebs at CISA's office there? Yeah. Why don't we have someone from the National Security Agency there? Why don't we have, a county that has probably a robust election program? They're testifying of the stuff that they did, the amount of money they needed, and the support and how they did it. Because that's really what Congress should be looking at. And forget that. I don't want to go on that rant. That absolutely upsets me. But
I think the only one that really can speak to truth about the alleged meddling, because the news wants you to think it's ground truth, but right. It's an alleged allegation, right? That it happened. General Nakasone does speak about partnerships extensively, both U.S. public sector and private sector partnerships. There's been several programs that he's led and spearheaded for the P3I and the private partnerships. That's part of what you're seeing happening in Augusta. Everybody sets their goals to help the next leader in their line achieve their goals, but the over strategic thing was private public partnership, right? So the P3I program, and all this actually leads back to one of my favorite things to talk about. And I think we mentioned it briefly at RSA, was NSPD 54, the presidential security directive that came from President George Bush Jr. And that's really everything you see right now, whether it's NIST, the 800 series, the NICE framework, RMF, all of these things were agency responses to that presidential directive. And, it came out in 2007. So it's pretty incredible that, we're this far down the road and we're just now starting to see some of the fruits of that labor, because all agencies had I believe 120 days to respond to what their plan of action was going to be. That's when the term cybersecurity actually even came out for U.S. public sector. I mean, we've always said the word cybersecurity, but in this presidential directive, it starts out as two words and then it morphed into one. And it's up for debate whether or not that was a typo or not. But it was interesting to go back and look at the agency concurrence, non-concurrence of who agreed with that and who didn't. And I can leave your guess to a couple of three-letter agencies that disagreed with that definition. So it's actually funny that those are normally classified documents, but the government had been sued by an organization called WOW, or EPIC, I think it was called. And you can actually read that NSPD in its entirety online. It's a really good read for anybody that's in our line of work.
It's to me, I think the reason no one paid attention in 2007 is the same way of how people don't understand how the FBI started investigating cybersecurity and how terrorism morphed into cyber quickly after 9/11.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was a comment about that to General Nakasone from an intel person who asked him, hey, all this is great, but when can we get to counterterrorism, go back to doing, what we do in counterterrorism? And he calmly explained to him that this is the new normal.
Right. You're not, I mean, even, so I saw when we were in Israel in June, we got a briefing at the Israeli National CERT in Beersheba. And I went to the side and I was speaking to someone there who I'll keep unidentified, and I can't share a lot, but I will say this. Most terror organizations today have more people in their cyber units than they do in their suicide bomber units, because they realize the damage is far greater in cyber than it ever would be by sending out suicide bombers.
Yeah, and there's no immediate cost to them. And I think that's one of the things that General Nakasone went on to talk about in this particular speaking engagement, is that our goal really is to try to make it cost prohibitive for our adversaries to mess with us, right? And there are capabilities that we have that just make us not the one you want to push, right? And if we can make it to where it's just too expensive for you to do it, then that's overall goal to degrade or deny your capability to operate in our space.
Right, but that kind of takes us from, I think from a government perspective, I think a lot of our adversaries today aren't willing to really, they'll poke at the government, but they won't break. They'll just poke to see what kind of reaction, it's kind of like, remember when you were a kid, you'd run up to someone, you'd just poke them and run away to see if they're going to chase you. Yeah. And if they didn't, you'd go back and poke them again. And eventually they chased you, and then you ran, scared.
I mean, that's easy to see just by opening up Shodan, right? And right. Or looking at your logs on your home router and seeing all the SIP vicious attacks that your ISP doesn't block, which they could, right? There are definitely people out there just testing the waters, but nation state threats have different motivations, right? Right. You talk about nation is much different of China, but there's also they're not the only two on the block anymore that are on people's radar, right? And then there's also a sphere of influence that both of those two players have on other countries. Look at South America. There's a lot of emerging threats coming from South America as well. But it's questionable as to who might be behind those, right? Whether it's one of the big two or somebody else.
But that kind of transitions to our financial sector, which has been a significant target of foreign actors. We just saw this week the plea bargain by one of the JP Morgan Chase hackers where he pled guilty and so forth. We've seen in Malaysia where a few guys that were working for a third-party supplier for Lion Air were actually the reason for the Malindo and Lion Air breach. Two guys out of India that did it. Again, kind of that threat, but it seems to be that our financial sector as a whole is constantly a target of not only nation state, but malicious actors as well who want to make money of it. I was at an event yesterday with a friend of mine from the Secret Service and one of my peers from the FBI, and they were saying business email compromise cost the global economy last year $26 billion.
Yeah, it's a really hard one too. I know there's some regulations coming from the European Union. They seem to be like trend setting right now, but it's not a bank's obligation at all to try to protect against that, right? It's third party risk. A lot of banks, like the one that I just left, they have teams that try to help recover the client's money, but they're really, if your email gets compromised, how is it the bank's responsibility, right? And I think the upcoming regulation changes from the European Union are actually going to make it the bank's problem to try to help reduce that threat vector.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. They're very anti-business in Europe. Just let's throw it at the business and see how they can do. But as an industry as a whole, what can organizations that do business with financial institutions do to help financial institutions really protect themselves? Because I feel like one of the bigger challenges is 80% of our economy is really derived out of small businesses. And they're typically the victims of BEC because big companies aren't really victims of BEC because business email compromise is derived of internal process. And most big companies have an internal process, meaning even if the CEO of Apple called the accounts payable person for Apple and said, transfer me $5 million, that person's going to go to the CFO and be like, Tim asked me to do this. Can you just verify? Yeah. Because no one's going to just randomly do it. There's an internal process for it. But in smaller companies, those internal processes go out the door.
People don't want to disappoint people.
Correct. They take advantage of our loyalty. Yep. Right? My loyalty to the company, my loyalty to help is how they take advantage of it. What do you think as industry, as professionals, what can we do to start to kind of understand that human manipulation and address it? Because technology doesn't always solve cyber problems. In fact, sometimes it causes more headaches than solutions.
I mean, I think the easiest, most cost-effective thing just goes back to addressing the underlying problem, which is the layer 8 issue, right? We had a chat about this in the pre-show stuff, but I think an investment should be made and continued with educating their customers, right? The ones that are most high risk, you shouldn't be getting an email from your CEO saying do this, and if that does happen, if that is the norm, then that's where a business process could probably be introduced with multi-factor authentication like we had chatted about. But there is a lot of stuff that's in play for wires and wires transfers, and it's those international wires that are not recoverable. I mean, anything domestic, banks have all agreed that they'll surrender that money in the event that there's an issue. But international, because you have to go through an intermediary, you're pretty much SOL.
And it depends on the country.
Sure.
Right? I mean, if money goes to the UK, you can pretty much stop it right there. Mm-hmm. That's a little bit easier to do than if it's going to, Macedonia, where you pretty much know that someone just picked up a bucket of cash.
One of the things I didn't know is in order to do, I actually just learned this last month, but in order to do certain types of wires like SWIFT, you actually that sending bank has to have an account over wherever it's going. So let's say it's going to Ireland, they have to have an account in that bank with enough money to cover their transfers, which was mind blowing to me because that's a lot of float to have out there for transactions like that, right? Like because you've got to kind of guess where your top transactions are going to be, and then have an account set up there. But that was news to me. I didn't know that was part of the process.
I mean, if you look at the financial sector as a whole today, and you've obviously been in the fintech and the financial services sector for the last few years, what would you say? What are some of the things that can really be avoided that people should be, maybe paying a little bit more attention to, or just, it involves just a few little things that you can do to really be secure?
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't put out the usual disclaimer about these opinions that are coming out of mine or my own and not representing Mastercard. But it's don't click on things, right? That's one of the simplest things. Is you shouldn't be doing a wire via email that you don't pick up the phone and call the person that just sent you that, hey, make this wire right away. It's important. It needs to be done in 30 minutes. I mean, that's just shady sounding in itself, right? How many legit wires are done that way? Maybe there is a company where CEOs talk to their employees like that, but fortunately, I've never worked at one. And I would think that any CEO or any risk acceptor that is going to be transferring a large sum of money would appreciate an employee following up just to make sure that they're the ones that asked to do that transaction. Now, the challenge would be is if an adversary could spoof both the email and then be the verifier for that transaction. That would kind of suck. I read about one last year where the only reason the employee caught it was that the person that asked for the wire always signed their emails in a certain way, with a smiling emoji or whatever. And this particular email didn't have that, and it raised the eyebrow of the employee, who would have ended up making a huge mistake, a very large transfer, international transfer.
Do you feel like there needs to be more of a global cooperation between financial institutions on cybercrime in this level?
I definitely think that, but they've been screaming about that for years, right? It's the number one problem that plagues our law enforcement agencies. I think the FBI has a pretty good global presence, but you come up with a country that is not FBI friendly, and those investigations get longer and sometimes never get resolved.
So you're right about the FBI having the global kind of footprint, although the FBI can't just go in a foreign nation and arrest someone without obviously coordinating it and ensuring it. I think there's a general reluctance in combating cybercrime from a law enforcement standpoint, simply because the laws don't match up. See, you and I can agree what murder is, you and I can agree what fraud is, you and I can agree what theft is. Mm-hmm. Those definitions are pretty standard across almost any normal nation. Computer crime and cybercrime, well, that's a whole different can of worms. There's no standard for it, and God didn't give Moses, do not hack someone else's computer as one of the 10 commandments.
Or don't ping sweep, right? Right. There's a big debate whether just ping sweeping is considered active or passive. But I think it's there is a lexicon that is generally accepted of what is cyber warfare, what is defensive cyber warfare. It's when you start getting the offensive stuff that things get sketchy, right? Whether it's nation state or whether it's a hacktivist, etc. I think the most precedent-setting case was when the U.S. indicted state actors, right? That attribution is a very slippery slope. One, if you're wrong, that could lead to kinetic effects outside of cyber. It could lead to public finger pointing from them to us, and that's a great concern, right? Anybody that works in cyber network defense, CNA, DCO, OCO, whatever you want to call it, it's only a matter of time before adversaries start doing that back to the U.S., and that's a slippery slope.
That kind of brings up the whole, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. Sure. But in cyber, there's so many different ways that the Chinese weaponize cyber. And I say China allegedly. Well, I'm not saying allegedly. You have to say allegedly. I don't have to. It's the Chinese. It's very interesting to watch their activities because the way they operate and in the mode they operate, they're getting really, really good at it. They're taking advantage of not only our openness to do business, but China is a threat to many U.S. organizations, simply out of the matter of fact that they're our largest trading partner. We all want to do business with China. We see 1.3 billion consumers there. And while they're thinking about making our, cheap toys that we buy at Amazon, we're thinking of what can we sell the Chinese. And there's this two-way relationship. And I feel like that's going to have some sort of impact, because it was very fascinating for me, because when I did travel to China and when I was in Russia, they valued U.S.-made products far more than their own.
Yeah. It's an interesting case about China. I've made it a point, both personally and through my career, to follow the trends, understanding the language, understanding the culture. And for anybody that needs a good read, The One Road to China is probably a good philosophy to understand that they don't do the short game, right? They don't plan for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. They plan for 100 years. And China's been a superpower 3 times, and they're well on their way to being a superpower within the next 20 years. And they're doing that through a lot of things, alleged manipulation of their economics. They value science, technology, engineering, math far more than anywhere else in the world. And they make it a sense of national pride, their education system, right? So, failure is not an option there. Whereas our education system gives you a broad education. You get geography, you get science and history and all that. It's not really baked into the education system that I've been made aware of through friends that I know from China.
You're absolutely right. And that kind of takes us, you brought up the whole thing of here we do very broad education, and in China and also in Russia, you notice that they're very targeted. They take a child, they recognize the skills of that child, and they go, oh, you're really good at this. We're going to make you the best at this, and so forth. That kind of takes us to workforce development, right? And I keep hearing different headlines. I'm not going to call people out. I feel like people are exaggerating our workforce shortage in cyber, no different than how they exaggerated in years past when it came to healthcare or other workforce short. We don't have enough truck drivers. People are going to have to pay a lot more for product because it's not going to. We have so many truck drivers on the road today that the threat of self-driving trucks is really threatening the livelihood of so many people. So, I always hear these numbers.
I really don't disagree with those stats, so to speak, right? Like an obvious shortage is women in tech, right? And there's a lot of challenges to that are probably we could go into a whole.
That's grassrooted.
It is grassrooted, but tech is not the only industry, right? Right. It just seems to be the one that's in the spotlight because of shenanigans and people not knowing how to treat people in the workplace, right? And that's, of course, that's absolutely unacceptable. But tech stuff, right? It's only been in the last 5 to 7 years that we've really made an effort to embrace STEM And I think my personal opinion is that a lot of that STEM focus went away when we started outsourcing jobs to other countries, whether it be China, whether it be Mexico. The skills to support that automation for those factories and different places, obviously went with it. You're always going to have your MITs, you're always going to have your engineering places, but the cost to attend those schools are tremendous, right? You have to swear off your first unborn child to afford to go to those places. And then on top of that, right? If there were no B1 visas anymore, which is kind of a gray thing to talk about, what would the attendance in those schools be like, right? Because a lot of the countries that we worry about most are sending people over here to get top-notch educations and then going back to their countries, right? Russia does it, China does it. There's a number of schools that do that, and not all of them, maybe none of them are adversarial, but you're sending those skills back to those countries versus really investing in the folks that are going to stay here and be contributors to our economy.
Well, I think, and again, that kind of goes into ecosystems around universities, right?
Yeah.
We see that in Silicon Valley, at Stanford specifically, I think their rate of people that leave the area is maybe 8%. I think it's the lowest in the country, because people that go to Stanford end up in Silicon Valley or in New York, or they end up somewhere in the country still working. They don't typically leave.
It concerns me though is the brain trust, right? That involves with those, like for instance, what I mean by that is you get somebody that graduates a 4-year college, and we're not even going to talk about a name brand Ivy League school, right? But almost 80% of the time during interview process, they have real unrealistic expectations, right? They think that they're going to graduate a 4-year school with a communications major and come into a Fortune 500 company making 6 figures and have all the great things. Now, there is an exception to that. There are savants out there that can read hex as ASCII, and those people are always going to do well. But the average student is not going to graduate a 4-year college making a 6-figure salary in tech without some experience behind the belt. But that's the crux, right? It's hard to get into tech. It's hard to get into InfoSec when you don't have the experience. It's kind of a double-edged sword, right? You go to an interview and they're like, "Hey, you look great, you interview well, but you don't have the experience we're looking for." Or it's the exact opposite. You got the experience, but you don't have the education background that we're looking for. And that's something that should probably be overcome before it becomes an issue. A lot of big companies are removing the requirement to have a degree. Like Google, Facebook, you don't have to have a degree to get hired in tech with them.
Because most people, the savants, as you say, don't end up in an Ivy League school.
Yeah.
They just don't, because some people just, a traditional 4-year school doesn't work for them. They end up in a vocational school. They end up at a science training. They end up somewhere where they're just getting the certs that they need so that their resume is acceptable to some organizations. But those skills are forthcoming. Do you feel like automation is going to change how we address workforce going forward?
Absolutely. And that's probably one of my biggest fears, because coming up through the InfoSec IT ladder, I avoided scripting and coding like the plague because it hurts my mind. And I went with infrastructure and forensics, and now Python, Bash, scripting, coding is like everything. I'm trying to play catch up myself and learn those skill sets, and I'm already seeing the advantage of if I marry up awesome PowerShell skills with what I know in infrastructure and forensics, you're really untouchable. And eventually, with machine learning and artificial intelligence and deep learning, you already saw an example of this with DEF CON when they did had $1 million prize for creating an OCO and DCO automated capability. And I think the contest was, if I remember, it was like 72 seconds long, but it emulated years upon years of going back and forth with each other. That's incredible. When you see Google talking about their ability to detect skin cancer just as good as a dermatologist and not missing, that is going to evolve into every sector, every industry. I see it everywhere I go. Somebody's talking about those buzzwords. And while it used to just be an RSA buzzword, you're really starting to see the effects of implementing some of those technologies in industry.
Well, and that kind of takes us into innovation, right? So a few weeks ago, I had the chief digital officer, the head of research and technology for the CDC on the show. We were talking about quantum and how quantum computing is right on the verge. And over the last weekend, you had Google declare quantum supremacy because they were able to do a process.
Accidentally.
It came out. Now they've managed to kill the story. I don't know what they did. Oh, wait a minute. That's right. They control what you see
online.
They own the internet. Yeah, they own the internet. That's why you got to search through different search engines to even find parts of it. But innovation continues to be a main driving point in a lot of organizations. And it's a lot of new technologies. We can call them buzzwords, but whether it be artificial intelligence, blockchain, quantum, IoT, IIoT, all these different, new technologies, new innovations, they also pose a security threat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times what I've seen in organizations is you've got some really smart security people, but they're kept out of the loop of the innovation and only brought in on the tail end of the innovation. So now they're essentially putting Band-Aids on major leaks rather than really setting up the infrastructure. And you being an infrastructure guy, what does security really need to do to help and keep up with the rapid pace of innovation and all these new technologies while still maintaining a security posture and a strong one at that?
One of my favorite speakers is Simon Sinek, and he's known for saying everything starts with why, right? So when I hear senior leaders pushing to go the automation route, especially for infrastructure, the first thing is why, right? Like when I hear say somebody wants to go to the cloud, right? Why? And if cost savings is in their top 10 of why they want to do it, then generally I try to tell them that that's not the right reason. There's many benefits of doing those things, but just a couple of days ago, I was at a cybersecurity exchange for financial services, and a gentleman by the name of Dr. Grant Jacoby, he works for Fifth Third Bank. I actually learned from him what the difference was between machine learning, artificial intelligence, and deep learning. They're often talked about synonymously, but they're actually very different. And one of the things that he mentioned is when you start having a vendor coming and pitching product X that's AI or machine learning or deep learning, some really important questions to ask is false positive rates. Like, what is the false positive rate of what you're doing? And that has a tremendous impact, or should have an impact, on your decision to start working with that particular vendor.
Well, I think you and I, when we were at RSA off the record, we were talking about some of the buzzwords we were hearing on the floor and all the different stuff that was going on then. And this year, I have something really special up my sleeve for RSA. I'll share with you offline. I don't want anyone to get an idea of what I plan on doing this year. But it's these buzzwords that create a false sense of reliance on technology. And we see that because for the person who doesn't know the difference between AI and machine learning, which is a lot of people.
Oh, I didn't know until 3 days ago.
Well, I'm not saying I've been an expert at it for a while, but I've been able to disseminate the difference between them through the conversations I have with people like yourself, with people who are way smarter than I am. And I was explained a while ago by a CISO, and I forgot which episode it's on, we're talking about AI and machine learning. And he goes, there's night and day difference. And he goes, and if someone tells me, if I see in a deck AI/ML, which is very common, he goes, I delete it.
Yeah.
He goes, I'm done. The moment they integrate AI and ML in one slide, in one PowerPoint, yeah, we use AI and machine learning. Well, which one do you use? Because those are two very different things, right? And they operate very, very differently. So how do I know which one I'm getting? Or someone will call AI, and then when you ask them, it's really machine learning.
Yeah.
Because they're two very, very different things. But it seems like security as a whole, I was having a conversation last night with someone, very smart guy in security. And one of our big topic points was around AI. And he was saying AI plus automation equal workforce not needed for basic stuff.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
I had to go home and have dinner, so I needed to end the conversation. I will tell you that. I actually support your opinion. I don't agree with it. I don't agree that. I think that, especially in security, you still need the human eye. You may be able to automate some stuff, but not.
I think that those three technologies will certainly complement what we do, and there may be a time in the very near future where reskilling or upskilling is going to be required to, because I think the days of on-prem boxes are probably numbered. Maybe for like the main providers, right? Like the AWS's, et cetera. But, on-prem equipment, unless you're dedicated to public sector or something where security has to be contained in, the cost of doing business in the cloud is just getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And that is definitely driving senior leaders. I think the thing that concerns me, though, is the investment in a technology and senior leaders thinking that they're making that investment in that technology and they have that technology, but then it being piss poor pushed out, or somebody doesn't think about the tertiary effects of that might have. And this is really big in the financial industry, right? You might push something out to be PCI compliant, but then you have an impact on your mainframes, or you have an impact on some wires program that you didn't know about. Or if you try to bring all of your developers in for the various apps, none of them will agree about how their particular app works. So capacity planning and predicting the tertiary effects of a security control are a huge challenge in the financial sector.
It seems, kind of in as we're watching security kind of develop, and especially in the financial sector, and now in your new role as a lead security research engineer at Mastercard, you're starting to see more and more organizations start to look at more internal research rather than rely on external research. Why do you think that shift is really happening, number one?
Well, with Mastercard, it's something that I never even thought of, right? Like, I think I had the same common misconception that everybody does about Mastercard, is that they're just a credit card company. But on day one, when you start your onboarding, the number one thing you're told is, we're not a credit card company. We're a security services company for financial transactions. And that's a big difference, right? Because we're not the one with the money. We're not the issuing bank. I couldn't help you get a Mastercard at all. But what we do see is the transactions, right? And that's a tremendous amount of data. And as a result of that, they have some really fantastic products that I'm learning about. Some really smart acquisitions that they've made. A company called APT that does big data analytics. They have Brighterion, which is a company that they recently acquired that does the same thing and gives predictability and risk scores. And these are obviously services that we provide to our customers. But New Data, that's another one, and Safety Net, those are all products that we've built off of being able to do big data analytics really well. It almost makes me feel like a salesperson when I learn about the 100+ products that Mastercard has, clients. There's even things cost money. We started the No Ransomware project. It's free for our customers. There's a number of other initiatives that Mastercard has led and partnered with even our competitors to bring better security to the financial sector.
As a CISO, if I don't have a research team, tell me why I need to have maybe a few people that do research internally.
Well, that's amazing because I'm actually working on that for our CSO right now. Research teams essentially are your arm. A CISO, I was a CISO for three and a half years, and for a small services company, and you can't be everywhere at once. But you're also targeted by everybody all at once, saying, "Hey, we've got the next best thing to slice bread." And I think having that capability to engage with vendors, agnostic of having a purchasing decision, right? Where you are really just looking at the value add of X and whether or not that might lower your risk somewhere within your organization. Being able to speak to that as a third party within your own company is really important. And at the end of the day, the CSO or the CISO has to accept that risk. They need a trusted agent within their organization that doesn't have a vested interest in a sale or selling a product to do that independent verification and validation. That's something that I did for a long time for HP, for U.S. public sector, and people really underestimate the value of doing independent verification and validation. Or you have your pay-to-play places, right? And we won't get into naming names. Everybody knows who the pay-to-play leaders are, but those don't represent the up and comers, right? The startups that are in stealth mode or whatever. And I look at our role at Mastercard as being able to be at the forefront of seeing the best things that come out and helping our leadership team make a decision on whether or not Mastercard would invest in that. Not just eating our own dog food, but investing in companies. Like, a lot of people don't realize that Mastercard acts and works much like a VC, right? We invest in startups and often we buy smaller companies to take that technology and wrap it into our own service product offering. So it's really cool to be able to do that and do it without any bias, right? It doesn't matter to me whether this vendor is good or not, and I can tell them without any worry whether they are good or not and whether they'd be a good fit with us. But at the end of the day, the hardest thing as a researcher is knowing that you're not the one that accepts the risk, right? So it's one of the things that I do as a warrant officer in the military. At the end of the day, I'm an advisor, right? My senior leaders look at me as a subject matter expert, and it's my job to uphold that, to develop my skill set, to learn things I don't know, and to be able to give a quick turnaround on things that I don't know about, because obviously it's impossible to know everything. But at the end of the day, if I put out a paper or an opinion on something, at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's my opinion, and that's what I'm being paid for. And if the leader decides to go with their own direction and against the grain of my advice, the hardest thing is not to take that personal, right? And as a warrant officer in the Army, I think I learned that lesson a long time ago. Right? You might tell your commander to go left, and they go right, and you're like, hey, but I told you everything was covered by this particular thing that covered you, but you chose to do this. At the end of the day, you have to be a unified message, and I think that's no different working for a commercial company like Mastercard. You may put out an opinion paper, and at the end of the day, if Mr. Green decides to go a different direction because shareholders said to do this, or he got pressure from somewhere else, that's his decision and his risk to make.
Well, I will say this. I've met Ron Green a few times, and he is a very, very smart, wise man.
and so I think you're in good hands.
Yeah.
Working with him, he's really good.
I'm excited, and I found out that he's a West Point grad, so a little nervous about that since I have more than one West Point grad in my food chain. So
it's very interesting to see the amount of veterans that get attracted into cybersecurity. Do you feel like we're starting to see that even happening more and more? I've seen it in Augusta, and I've seen it in Fort Meade. I'm seeing it in San Antonio, where we're seeing even servicemen and veterans who weren't in cyber and signal or intel units transition into cyber.
Yeah, I think that is a good trend, especially with cyber, right? You can count on somebody that is cyber, whether they're Guard, Reserve, whether they're Army, Air Force. We have a pipeline that we have to go through that is the same for everybody, and it's about 18 months of training. I mean, when I went through my first MOS as a warrant officer, I was a 255 Sierra. That training right there is ridiculous. It's the 180 days basically of SANS training taught by the course authors. And, so the greats of John Strand, Johannes Ulrich, Dave Holzer, Jason Fawson, those guys that wrote the books that are sitting in front of you are right there teaching you. And it's such a valuable opportunity. But even outside of cyber, right? Hiring military usually is a good path. There are some exceptions, right? Anybody that is put out for bad conduct discharge, obviously that's not a smart decision. But you know that when you're hiring a veteran, that you're getting somebody that at least knows how to follow directions, hopefully, at least knows how to understand implied tasks, right? If somebody tells you to go take the hill, right, it's your job to go do that, but there's going to be implied task to achieve that. If my boss at Mastercard says, hey, I want you to go make partnerships in industry, right, there's a lot of implied tasks that I need to just understand and do, but also understanding what your left and right limits are, right? Those all come with, I think, ingrained into you as a veteran, regardless of what branch of service you come from. We all get really good training that the average person doesn't get. And I know without a doubt, I am only where I'm at in my life because of the training that I've gotten from the military. I mean, it took me from a life where a cycle of a pattern of misconduct was occurring with my family, and took me away from all that and gave me the skills to know right and wrong and to make good choices. And I'm not always good at it, but I know that the military has done a good job of ingraining that in me. And of course, having to maintain a clearance is a good grounding aspect of my life as well. Right? I'm very careful about what I do and what I say and how I do it to not lose my clearance.
I think clearance gives you a level of integrity that you otherwise would not be subject to in a civilian life.
Yeah, definitely.
And the military gives you a level of not only integrity, but you do as you say and you say what you do. Because if you don't, like you said, you're going to find yourself on the outside looking in.
Well, it's all about, you remember the old acronym leadership, right? So that is 1000% applicable to everywhere. You got loyalty, duty, respect, right? Selfless service, honor, integrity, and professionalism. Those are all things that every employer wants their employees to do. And I don't think I've been to an employer yet that doesn't emphasize that more than Mastercard does. I mean, I'm not trying to be an advertisement for my employer, but it's quite amazing in the onboarding process to learn that they've been selected multiple times as one of the most integrity places to work, right? Like they're most ethical place to work. That's the term. There's only 128 companies selected every year, and Mastercard has won multiple times, and it comes all the way down from the top. I mean, when you come on board. You get to watch a video from our CEO, Mr. Ga, who says quite simply, if you're not doing the right thing, this is not the place for you to work. And I've never heard a CEO, it's kind of an unwritten rule, right? Do the right thing, don't be an idiot. But I've never heard somebody out with that particular tone before of, you're not going to be here.
Right. So, yes, I mean, it's great to hear that from Mastercard. I think overall, it's good to know that there are companies out there that still want to do the right thing. I think very often that's not the case. Sometimes you feel like that. I mean, I remember Google's like "do no evil," right?
Yeah.
And then we see how that's working out right now within Google and some of the stuff that's going on. But nonetheless, I think that's the challenge of our time. We live in an era that is very different from one we came from. Technology has evolved so quickly, so fast. Information that people get is, when we used to pick up a newspaper, I remember the service, you'd get the paper.
What's a newspaper?
It's that thing, paper, Typically, you'd put it on your car window, or you would use it to wrap your glass when you were moving. And as young ones, we all remember the amount of newspaper you'd go pick up from people just so that you can, properly pack your glass when you're moving.
And you remember the Sunday paper, right? Came in the big, like you could knock somebody out if you hit them with it.
Did you ever deliver papers?
I did not, but I've seen people that deliver papers and their car was weighted down by all the papers that they had in the back, and they would chuck it out their window. I mean, that's now your big box delivery place is. Don't want to get in trouble saying names, right? But there's been several instances where they just chuck the package at the door and then take a picture of it in place. They're getting caught by a lot of the home security cameras, just chucking your package. They're doing it just like newspapers, right?
Right. I've always wondered. I go, with all the technology and all the smart stuff today, why would you do that in front of someone's house? Like, you realize you're gonna end up on some Facebook video and in a local news story as that guy, and you're gonna get fired.
My most favorite thing, it came out last year, and I don't know if it was real or not, but was the guy that created the glitter bomb with the cell phones. That was totally the most epic thing ever, where it even had like the fart spray and just started spraying it in their car, and they would throw it out and he would go get it. That's hilarious, right? It's good to catch people not doing the right thing, but I try to be trust is earned, not granted, obviously, right. But I try to not wear the everybody is an adversary hat. It's very easy to come up with that frame of mind, being from the Intel community or coming from the cyber community, because you see so much bad stuff. But in a workplace, I generally think that everybody wants to do the right thing. But sometimes what aids in people cutting corners is rushing to market, trying to be the first, be the fastest, be the best. Sometimes that's where I see the most corners cut. And I don't think that it's always done with malintent. It's more done to try to get to market before somebody else does.
I think most things that we see from people that are done is not malicious. That's my belief. And I've seen that even in the Intel community, right? We see that you start to, follow stuff along, and you realize these people are playing small parts. They don't even know the part that they're playing is really leading to something malicious. They're just, again, no different than how social engineering works in a company today. You're loyal to your company, as you're stating right now. Your zeal, your passion towards Mastercard is evident in the way you talk about it. You're loyal, and people see that loyalty and want to take advantage of it. Help me do this; it's going to help you. I was sitting with someone who we both mutually know, who works at a financial institution, and they were sharing with me that they were meeting with a company that was trying to sell services to that company, to that financial institution, and they were sitting with this vice president who reports directly to the CISO and asking if they can get the CISO's road plan so that they can understand how to position their proposal. Now that person who we know it has a very high level of integrity and said, I'm not doing that. That's not happening. And, maybe we should probably wrap up this meeting because I got stuff to do.
Yeah.
Because that's this kind of, trying to take advantage of someone's loyalty to be like, hey, we really want to help your boss or whatever the case may be, but we're really not getting. I mean, this is the kind of basic stuff now. They weren't very good, but social engineers, threat actors, they're very good at it. They study your LinkedIn profile. They study your digital DNA and digital footprint. They know that over the weekend you went to, Smoky Mountain, and they're going to talk to you about it because that's how you get the first level of alertness down. Oh, he knew from, John that I went to Smoky Mountain.
Yeah. And I mean, it's playing on what we talked about earlier with the layer 8 issue. But, I think that's another advantage to having security researchers within your organization, right? Is it reduces the risk to that risk acceptor that they don't have to engage with those people, and the optics don't look bad. Somebody's doing it on their behalf and then providing an opinion one way or the other. Can that be abused? Absolutely. But that also goes back to hiring practices, right? Hiring people that are of sound mind, sound ethics, and that's just not where I work. That's really anywhere. Fun thing is starting here, you ask, well, what is it that you do, right? And everybody knows Brian Krebs, right? He's probably one of the most well-known and well-respected security researchers out there. But look at what he had to go through to get to where he's at, right? And I always challenge anybody that says, "Oh, well, I want you to be like Brian Krebs." I'm like, well, it took him a long time to get to where he's at, and that's why he's independent. He does his own thing, but I mean, he's been swatted. He's been set up, for his opinions, and not everybody always agrees with it. So he's just of the intestinal fortitude to be able to do that, right?
He published something this morning with the guy that allegedly sent the heroin to his house in Virginia.
Oh, wow.
10 years ago.
I heard that they were making a movie about him. I spoke to him briefly. He had made a mention about that, but that was a couple of years ago, and I haven't seen it. So him and Jason Street, too. Jason Street said they're doing a movie about him. So
well, I think cyber movies are going to be the next big thing. So David, you and I need to write a script and go to Hollywood.
Well, everybody says I look like Matthew Lillard too. So I think you stabbed a little too deep, man. So, yeah. I actually have Hackers. I gave it to Kieran. I can never say her last name, but she's a real well-known speaker out of Tel Aviv. I think I'm saying her name right, but
Karen.
Karen, yeah. I gave her a signed copy of Hackers that was signed by Matthew Lillard that I won in a HFC silent auction years ago. Her and I have some very funny history, and I love her. She's such an amazing person. She's so gifted, very smart.
Very positive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But it's that Israel brain trust, right? We're trying to replicate that. I think that the senior leadership there was very smart in understanding the value add that mandatory military service had, and then really smart IT folks coming out of that mandatory military service, and then creating a government-owned, backed incubator that has led to some of the biggest name brands out on the market, right? The U.S. is doing that as well through the DIU, so the Defense Innovations Unit. Used to be DIUX, but now it's DIU, and they're out of Silicon Valley area as well.
We'll be speaking with DSS at Augusta, and
Nice.
We're very excited about those guys because they do some really cool stuff for DoD.
Is that the Red Dart program that you'll be speaking with? Yeah, Red Dart's awesome. So that's basically their community engagement program. And the lady in our area, I can't think of her name right now. that represents the North Carolina area, is just amazing. Wonderful speaker and does excellent presentations. Anytime Red Dart comes to our area, like our ISSA chapter in Raleigh, it's a packed house. And we're used to having anywhere between 100 to 150 people at our chapter meetings, but it's usually standing room only when Red Dart comes. You'll really enjoy that experience.
Awesome. I'm super psyched about it. David, I want to say thanks for being on the episode today. I really appreciate your time. This was
Thanks
awesome.
for having me. Thanks for having me.
This
Appreciate
was
it.
really a lot of fun. So for those listening, David Vaughn, you can connect with him on LinkedIn, right? You have Twitter?
Yes, LinkedIn is preferred. Twitter is kind of like one of those things that gets me in trouble sometimes. So
I don't know. I mean, I get all my news today from Twitter, directly
Oh,
from
yeah.
the source.
Oh no, I do
I just
too.
follow.
But
I just follow the president.
yeah, I won't comment on that.
That's how I get all my news today. I just hang around on Twitter all day and verify it. But having said that, I want to first of all, like I said earlier, thank you for your time. Thank you for agreeing to come back on the show. I really do appreciate it. Good luck in your new position at Mastercard. I think they have an asset, and I'll be sure to send Mr. Green a note, Ron Green, and just be like, "You got David Vaughn. You have the number one asset in your organization."
It's really funny you say that, right? That we have a person on our team that monitors speaking engagements and stuff like that, and I think she's freaking out right now because I'm already on my 4th speaking engagement in my 3rd week, and of course, we always do the general caveats of not representing our employer, et cetera. But it's funny because I don't think that she knew the brand that that Mastercard had brought in. I'm getting ready to start my 2nd term with the board of directors with ISSA. I leave for Dallas tomorrow, actually, for our first meeting of the new term. So the next 3 years, I'll be representing ISSA International. So it's been a fun road.
Congratulations.
But with that, that's what's gotten me in front of you, right? Like that's why I was at RSA. I was there for ISSA. That's why I was at Black Hat representing ISSA. So it's been a fun ride.
ISSA, a great organization. Absolutely. Again, David, thanks for being with us. If you're tuning in and you're listening, you can follow David on LinkedIn. You can see the link below. If you're listening, make sure you subscribe, give us 5 stars. Love feedback, love comments. David, thanks again for being on the show. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week with more on our Saturday CISO Talk.